X years in the future. The age of revelation. Narrator says we made it, Steve. The Avengers are still fighting toward that dream. Your old teammates. Natasha Romanoff says, you got a tear, Clint. Clint Barton says, damn it. This is the only jumbo carnation tailored suit I got. Narrator says, after a rough decade they're still the same at their core. Scott Lang says, Danny, couldn't you make me look like a young Tom Hanks for this? Cannonball says, but Scott, you already look dapper. Scott, ha. Thanks, Cannonball. Or should we call you Handsome Mutant Rocket Man? Danny narrates, it took a lot of hustle for Cannonball and I to get this team back to where it's at. The world still needs its Avengers. A woman says, welcome to the Steve Rogers Memorial, Avengers. We're so pleased you made it to our inauguration. Danny says it's an honor. Not only to pay our respects to an inspirational leader, but to our friends, family, and the many other innocent lives we lost along the way to the X-Virus. Clint says, Deke, Amy, Tito. My old neighbors are up here. You should have seen how they stood up to the tracksuit mafia. Natasha responds, they'd be made honorary Avengers. Clint cries thinking about his neighbor. Cannonball says, just let it all out, man. This is the place to grieve. Scott says, there'll never be enough times for me to say, you made me one proud father, Cass. Vision says, knowing the copious afterlife planes in existence. She must be smiling from one of them and returning the same sentiment. A civilian says, you got blood on your hands. Scott asks, excuse me? Civilian says, that virus is still spreading from the mutant lands, killing hundreds of people at a time. Another civilian yells, what ya gonna do about it? Vision says, this epidemic goes beyond our team's level of abilities. It'll take the joint efforts of our world leaders, virologists, and response teams to coordinate a nationwide plan. Civilian yells, excuses. Another says, we know where your allegiance lies. That mutant dictator, Revelation, must love seeing us humans go extinct. You ex-Vengers are no better than his enforcers. Clint shouts, get our fucking name right. The Avengers have always saved your asses. Civilian responds, you're all part of Revelation's mutant propaganda. Danny says, please, settle down. This is a place of decorum after all. Captain America wouldn't want to see us divided. Civilian yells, you got no right carrying that man's shield. Danny tells, I've heard that a lot. Well, he thought I did. I was with him in Washington. Kneeled by his side in his final moment. Captain America says, half of the world's gonna push back Moonstar, but you gotta keep fighting for them. They'll come around. Moonstar says, and I vow to uphold that promise until I die. The world keeps shifting and so do the Avengers. Yes, we're mutants. But that won't stop us from handling our duties as the world's guardians. We've proven time after time that we're capable of defending every corner of the globe, especially when a threat comes from Revelation's territories. We will protect all of you unconditionally. Now please, we're here to respectfully mourn our fallen. Civilian shouts, you're no Captain America. Why? Not my Avengers. Scott says, guys? Viz is detecting something. Moonstar asks, what is it? Civilian says, it's the virus. Another says, get them out of here. Vision reports. Vision self-detects an atmospheric breach. We are about to be invaded. Jan speaks, strange. No greeting by its orbital defenses. Pilot says, starting our descent on planet Terra, Lord Jan the Accuser. Jan says our intel was right. The planet's preoccupied with its own crisis. Earth's mightiest heroes are broken. Commence our annexation. Pilot shouts, for the Kree Empire. Avengers Quinjet en route. Hawkeye says, a shame we couldn't stick around for the president. Moonstar says, if he dusted off his old wings, Sam Wilson wouldn't have to deal with Air Force One's flight delays. Shang-Chi says, Cap would be proud of such an uplifting speech back there. She thanks him and tells him, I'm just so tired of constantly having to prove ourselves. In a more casual setting, I would have ditched the lecture. Hawkeye says, the alien ships are veering toward the Revelation territories. That's more like the Seraphim's purview. Cannonball says we're the Avengers. Earth is our purview. Shang-Chi says, Avengers assemble. The alien ships start destroying Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Part of the Revelation territories. Cannonball says, try to keep up, Vish. We gotta punch more breathing holes in these Kree tin cans. Vision says, don't you worry, Cannonball. Vision Self and the Technarch are operating simpatico. Jan says, I spoke too soon about their defenses. Fighters bring down those bogies. Pilot agrees with Jan, but Variable Man whacks their ships. Variable Man says, Variable Man reporting on the ground. Smashing these dweebs like flies at a 4th of July barbecue. Hawkeye says, Thanks for all the distractions, fellas. I'm about to drop the kids off for a little playdate. Moonstar says, Roger that, Hawkeye. Cannonball says, let me get the door for ya. Shang-Chi yells, come on, Avengers. Let's give our guests a hearty welcome. Water Widow says, I'll bypass their security system. Sure you'll be fine on your own? Moonstar, thinking I ask myself this every day, Cap. Did you pass the shield down to me out of convenience? I was the only one there. Captain America says, don't give up the dream, Danny. For everyone's sake. She thinks, though I know in your heart, you saw we both wanted the same thing. She says, we got this. Now go. She thinks, in a world more divisive than ever, I wish you could see us carry the spirit of what you stood for. It took your old teammates a long while to get used to what the X-Virus did to them. They're new, normal. Scott can fragment ally grow and shrink. He can also alter his body's density to be impenetrable. But he couldn't change his physical abnormality. We're still working on his self-acceptance. The Black Widow was stubborn. Water Widow says, all corridors are unlocked. Moonstar narrates, Water Widow was a talking puddle when I found her. She thought all of her training went down the drain. Sorry for the pun, but we can laugh about it now. Water Widow says, meet you on the bridge. Moonstar narrates, Water Widow came around after I taught her how to hold it together. Before I really got to know him, I'd heard stories of Shang-Chi being a man of precision. But since the X-Virus, everything he touches shatters into glass. He had to relearn self-control, every waking minute. And when he can let loose? Vision has been our guiding light since Cannonball and I picked up the pieces. He holds a vast knowledge of the team's history. Then he was consumed by a Technarch overgrowth in the territories. He's connected with every activity where the Technarch grows. But it can be too much noise for him to process. His daughter Viv wasn't as lucky to survive the fusion, and he has been shielding his emotions since. If only he would let me help him. Hawkeye says, you got the ship lucky. Moonstar narrates, and Hawkeye. Hawkeye says, Variable Man, you've got some incoming giant paperweights. Vision's had another EMP fit. Variable Man says, I'm on it. But I only got 2 hands. Hawkeye says, this last size change arrow I've been holding on to better still work. He shoots down a ship. There. One less thing to catch. Moonstar narrates, he's still Hawkeye. Only with more arms. Jan says, you may have disrupted our invasion, but I'll make sure there will be nothing left of this world for you to protect. Moonstar thinks, Cap, you handed me some big boots to fill. Someone calls Jan from behind. Supreme Intelligence says, it was a grave error to assign you this conquest. This primitive planet proved too much for you. Jan gets astonished to see the Supreme Intelligence there. Supreme Intelligence says, Nom. Jan asks, what's the meaning of this? Moonstar says, it's a mental projection, to keep you distracted from this psionically charged shield. Water Widow says, slimy lips looked real convincing, Danny. The ship's navigation is completely wrecked. We're on a collision course. Moonstar radios Variable Man to get ready for a large pickup. Moonstar narrates, the way we do things can get messy. Cannonball says, time for a game of catch. Moonstar narrates, but we still get the job done. Variable Man says, aw, you're such a big help, little guy. Moonstar narrates, these are different times, Steve, and we're making the best out of it. Minutes later. Variable Man says, yay, cleanup. A red and black mass is seen approaching the civilian mutants. Revelation asks, how are you feeling now, Vish? Vision answers, the closest I can describe this is a very bad migraine. Shang-Chi asks, think the Seraphim know what to do with him? Seraphim says, well, let's give it up for our Avengers. Another Seraphim says, sweet. We already rounded up all of the Kree. Hawkeye says, speak of the devils. Cannonball says, Bobby DaCosta. Bring it in, man. Bobby says, impressive work as always. The big guy watched the whole thing. Offer still stands if you want to join our club. You already passed the audition. Danny replies, the answer's still no. Bobby says, you know I won't stop asking, Danny. Hawkeye says, here. Maybe your master has plans for this guy. Bobby says, probably. Thunderbird and Random can take him in. Shang-Chi says, now that that's taken care of, I'll help Scott with cleanup. Vision says, I'll join you. Scott, engulfed in some kind of biotechnological mass, asks for help. Shang-Chi asks, Scott? Vision answers, he's inside this contraption along with 6 mutant civilians. This Technarch variant evolved from the land's overgrowth. Shang-Chi says, I'll break them out. Vision warns, do not make contact with it. It's infectious. Scott, in pain, says, everything hurts. Cannonball asks, what the fuck's going on with Scott? Bobby says, For the record, that ain't normal around here. Danny says, come on. We need to save him. Vision says, stand back. It has already fused with their DNA, altering their mutant physiological state at an accelerating rate. Danny asks, Vish, where did this come from? Vision answers, I detected zero trace of this from the Kree ships. It must be local. Hawkeye says, I'll put this all to a halt. I got you, buddy. Freeze arrow. That should hold them in place. What the hell's going on here? Scott is in agony from the engulfment of the Technarch variant. Shang-Chi says this thing came up from the ground. You better have some answers. Sunspot says, like I told your crew, we know nothing about this. Danny says, Doug, I know you're watching all of this. Scott says, guys, I think I reached the end. Danny says, Scott, please, hang in there. We'll figure this out. Scott says, I want to be with Cass. Scott's whole body turns into a giant sculpt of steel and he goes quiet. Danny shouts, Scott, whatever this thing is, no mutant is going to be safe from it.